The Tales of a Red Clay Rambler is made possible in part by Starworks, host of the 2022 Woodfire NC International Conference. The conference will kick off May the 21st with two pre-conference events happening simultaneously in Asheville and Seagrove, where visiting artists will load and fire a variety of wood-firing kilns. The main conference runs from May the 26th to the 29th at Starworks in Star, North Carolina, and features artists from around the world discussing the future of wood-fired ceramics. For more information, please visit woodfirenc.com. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Jones. I am a studio potter. I live in Connecticut with my wife. I am the guest host this week with said wife, Dr. Melissa Weimer. Babe, can you introduce yourself and tell them what you do?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Melissa Weimer. I am Brian's wife, and I'm a physician at Yale School of Medicine. And I am a general internist and specialize in addiction medicine.
We have two school-age children, which keeps us busy. Part of this podcast, most of this podcast is us going to talk about how we make it work and how we balance life and work and things that have helped us. Not giving advice necessarily, but maybe some of this information someone else can use to their advantage when they get to this point or they decide to have kids of their own. So let's start where we are now, babe, in terms of like workload for you is pretty high with your job. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? And then I'll talk about my stuff.
So my job is pretty busy, pretty taxing, long hours. It is variable week to week. So I don't see patients all the time. I work in the hospital setting, so my work now consists of weeks of time on what's called service, so times where I'm doing addiction medicine consulting in the hospital. Those weeks are longer weeks where it's really the priority and the majority of the work during that time is to see patients who are hospitalized, who may have a problem related to substance use, which is why they were hospitalized. So I see them in the hospital. I have a team of people that we work together to evaluate patients and offer them treatment and connect them to ongoing care. So those weeks of service are generally, honestly, anywhere from 80 to 100 hours of work for that week. And then the times that I'm not on service, I have administrative responsibilities as the medical director of our addiction medicine consult service. I have research responsibilities. I have grants and research projects that I'm involved in. And I also have teaching responsibilities because I'm an associate program director for our addiction medicine our addiction medicine fellowship. So I have a lot of other responsibilities and things that I do on the weeks that I'm not on service. Of course, the weeks that I'm on service, I'm also have to do those things as well. So that makes those weeks particularly challenging. I do have more flexibility when I'm not on service. So currently for the last 2 years, the times that I'm not on service, I am able to be at home doing most of the work. Not always, but a lot of the time I can be at home, which allows some flexibility. And part of the reason that academic medicine works well for, I think, our family is that I do have times where I can be more flexible, but the family knows when potentially weeks where I'm not going to have a lot of flexibility, and we work to adapt and make sure that we're, taking care of the kids and getting everything they needed on those harder weeks.
Yes. And we do that by planning. So today's Sunday, we haven't done it yet, but we will, a chunk of the day, a chunk being like a half an hour up to an hour, planning out the week in terms of what we're going to be eating, who's picking up the kids schedules, because they have extracurricular activities and things that they're involved with. You might have late meetings. There's always something that has to happen, errand-wise, chore-wise, house issues that have to happen. Last week was putting a new roof on the house. This week, there's 2 other things I saw on the list for today and tomorrow. And we put that all into a spreadsheet, and then I print it out, and then we hang it by the phone, and then we can kind of see it. Everyone knows where it is. I mean, the kids don't look at it, but I look at it like every day, all day, just to make sure I know where I am and know what's going on. That's really been helpful. That's a new thing as well. I feel like it's been a newer since January, since last month when the Omicron stuff started happening, and we needed to put more structure in place in terms of organization. It's been a big thing. And as the one who does most of the cooking, it's nice to plan it and have to think about it 15 minutes before dinner has to be ready. I can maximize my time by getting things ready earlier in the day. And when I do the shopping, it's also, I know what I'm getting. I'm not just throwing whatever in the basket and running out the store and forgetting 80% of what I actually needed.
I mean, we've always kind of met at least once a week or periodically during the week to talk about schedules, because there's sort of no other way to organize it. We also send each other calendar invites around important things. But I think, right, in the last month, we started adding more specific detail around meals because we wanted to be a little bit better about what we were eating and just planning more. And so I think that that's been helpful there. But we have always found it essential to meet periodically, go through a weekly checklist of sorts to say who's doing what when, what's on your schedule, what's on my schedule. I need help to do this, or you need help to do that, and talking through it. Definitely weeks that I'm on service or weeks that one of us is out of town or what have you. I mean, we couldn't get by without that.
No, we couldn't.
Very transparent communication.
As you made clear, 80 to 100-hour working weeks for you is a lot of time. And so the kind of the schedule revolves around the house schedule revolves around your kind of schedule. Not revolves, but since you're the one who's working those kinds of insane hours, everything else kind of emanates from that. So in terms of my studio practice, we get up, we get the kids ready for school, we eat breakfast. I drop them off to school most mornings. I take the dog for her thing. We have a dog. She needs to go outside and run around the field. So that's like half an hour after school. By the time I get back, I have like for the other potters, I have like between 10 and noon to get a good chunk of work done. And then sometimes there's a break for lunch and then a little more work. But I have to make dinner. Dinner has to start around 2 because I have to pick up the kids at 3:15 or so. And then whatever happens after that, it's like there's no studio time after that for me. So my working days, I can get, on a good day, I get like 3.5 hours solid. But that's like fully focused, engaged. I've already I work my studio schedule like I work the food schedule. So I make the decisions ahead of time. I'm not guessing what I want to do. I make a list. I go through each day and I write down what I think I can expect to make. And then I do that as long as it's on the list. And I'm learning much better now in terms of like, I can make 30 cups in a day or 40 cups in a day. No problem with those hours I have. I can have almost 100 cups done in a week. But when it comes to larger forms or more complex stuff, I have to lower my expectations. I can't expect to make that kind of headway. part of that's just with the forms that I'm making and the process involved. And it's also, I think, a certain amount of thinking power I have to do to make new stuff. It requires me to slow down so I can think about. It's like any other new skill someone would have to learn how to do. You have to go a little slower. You can't expect to blast through it without learning. I also am lucky enough to have a studio assistant, and she's been fantastic. And she comes in 12 hours a week. She really has been great. And she's been with us since July. She has a good head on her shoulders. She's very dependable. She understands my sometimes poorly worded instructions, and she can figure things out. And she doesn't sit still. She kind of, if there's nothing to do right that second, she'll start cleaning, which is amazing. So that really takes a lot of the workload. I can focus on my workload the way I want to and not have to do a bunch of little things that she can do. That's been a big deal.
And she's also helpful to the family sometimes if we need extra, an errand here or there. That's been helpful to our family as well.
Absolutely. And she's helped with the dog in the past. Mm-hmm. And it's been very, very good. So that kind of gives the listeners an idea of what we deal with kind of day to day, week to week. There are other things like how do you figure out vacation schedules? The same way we talk about what we have time off, what we can afford to take time off, and financially what we can afford to take. And you also have conference season, which kicks off. It's like a springtime academic thing, not unlike, NCECA happens every March. The medical conferences happen around the same time. Sometimes those are like a week long, or, there's a week long one and there's a weekend one, or since coronavirus has happened, they've been canceled and there's been, all virtual, but you'll be going back. So that another thing we have to kind of wrestle with is how do we, it'll be fine for us, but usually, how do we work out when mom is gone and gone for a week, which is a long time, It's
kind of been nice with, I guess silver lining of COVID is that there hasn't been as much travel, which, before COVID was really, I would say, pretty frequent. And as an academic, as someone in academic medicine, there's responsibilities for attending conferences, presenting at conferences, presenting at talks, meetings, there's invitations to lots of different things. And it's been honestly pretty nice not to have to travel as much. I miss seeing my colleagues around the country. So I'm excited to get back into that. But at the same time, it's been nice to have a little bit of a break. I feel like I'm not missing out as much on the kids and seeing them grow up and being able to be more part of day to day, which are things that I miss when I'm not around.
And if you leave, you could leave for a week and then they're almost not different people, but kids change so fast. A week is a long time. It can be a long time.
Yeah. Particularly when they're little, that was really hard. And we have some, interesting stories about things that we had to do when they were little, and I was still, breastfeeding our kids, and I would leave and we'd have to FedEx breast milk across the country. We had some pretty interesting ways to deal with that. So we've had to adapt, certainly.
Well, okay, if you're going to talk about that, not to get into super specific details, but one of the kids would not drink formula, just wouldn't, and threw up on me multiple times. And so we actually borrowed breast milk from friends who had enough.
It was an SOS. Who in our friend tribe has breast milk available? Yeah.
So I had to meet her in a parking lot, like a weird drug deal, because that's where the more central location, because she was in the middle of her work day, and she gave me the breast milk, and then and he kind of drank it. The face he made was so funny. It's this is not the right stuff. This is not my drink. I don't want this drink. But he drank it kind of I guess so. I could say I've never been happier to see a FedEx driver pull up. Because I remember when you sent me the tracking number, and I tracked that thing, and it was overnight, and we had never done it. I've never seen an overnight come in like that. You sent it out at 7:00 that night from one side of the country, and I checked it almost every hour.
I think it was in New Orleans or Florida or something.
You were in Boston. Yeah. No, you were in Boston.
Oh, yeah. This was when we lived in Oregon. Yeah.
Yes, in Oregon. I remember checking almost every hour. Where is that thing? Where is that thing? And sure enough, it's 7:00 the next day. And he was so happy. He was almost as happy as I was. Because that's a lot of, he can really launch. He can really throw up. He knows how to do it. He's a real puker.
Well, at that point, we were thinking, if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to leave and come back early. And, what are we going to do? And then that stress of for not being there, being worried about him. This is our second child, being worried about him. And also feeling really guilty for not being there. And as women know, a very hard situation with which to pump because you're just trying to, get as much breast milk out when you're pumping. And of course, pumping is different than just feeding your child. And I'll never forget the heroic measures we had to go through to ensure that he
that you had to go through. I was just waiting there with him. You had to do all that crazy stuff. That was stressful. And, my second question with all that whole chunk we just talked about is kind of like, can we talk about the kids and how their schedules work? As long as if we're on the ball as a couple and we have an idea of what's supposed to happen throughout the week, we almost tend to be, I should be able to speak for myself. I feel like I'm able to be a little more flexible and I can provide the kind of routine that I need to provide the kids the routine that they need. So it kind of comes down from the top. It goes top down. It's easier for me to help them out when we know what's happening. As someone has the person who has to take care of the dog and them get the food ready, which is kind of three big things. When those are all in place, it's a much more fluid operation, to get them to where they need to go when they need to get there throughout the week or during the weekend. So I think we kind of answered that question. The routine for us is really routinizing ourselves. And this started early on. We got kids. We were lucky enough to have kids who slept well, who still sleep well most times. And we were able to get them sleep trained the way we wanted to. And that was a big deal. Because once we were able to get a chunk of sleep in, we could perform better.
Well, we knew for our family that sleep was going to be an essential component of us being able to function well. We knew that if neither one of us was sleeping, we weren't going to be able to be, our best selves. And so we really focused a lot of our energy on sleep early on and ensuring the kids had good naps and, blackout curtains and sound machine and the whole 9 yards. So we focused on that really, really early. We were very regimented at the detriment of other things, which, meaning that bedtime was 6:30 no matter what. So we couldn't be out past that time. That's not the case now, but when they were little, it was definitely like, we have to start bedtime at 6:30. They have to be in bed and ready to go at 7. We had a whole routine, and that structure, that routine not only helped us, but it really helped them sort of know what to predict. And it was just, that was bedtime. And so it always, that's how it went. Of course, it's not like your kids are, read a manual and they're like, okay, sure, go with the flow. I mean, we certainly had times when that didn't work. Our youngest at one point in time, really resisted going to bed. And anytime he would leave the room, he would have some very negative behaviors that were not well liked by anyone. And so that went on for an entire week. And so anyway.
That was just a week?
Yeah, it was a week, but it was a very hard week.
That seemed like it was a month.
It was only a week.
Are you sure it was just a week?
Yes, it was.
I must have been much more traumatized by that than.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's a puker. So and people can can get out of that statement what they can if they can put the two things together. Kid doesn't want to go to sleep. Also, he's a puker. You can put the A and B together and get C, which stands for cleaning up lots.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Amoco Brent. For the past 100 years, Amoco Brent has been creating ceramic supplies for our community, ranging from underglazes to electric kilns, and they have no plans of slowing down. With over 3,000 products, Amoco Brent's top priority is making sure that all of their customer needs are met. From the professional to the student and everyone in between, their high-quality materials enable you to make your best work. To learn more, check them out at amoco.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Amoco Brent. You can also show them how you use Amoco by sharing your work online with the hashtag HowIAmoco. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfeld Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of thousands of objects made by over 800 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfeldcollection.com.
Can we jump back in time a bit, babe, and can we talk about what we remember about preparing for our first child, things that we did? I mean, you were preparing physically. You had, as the person who gave birth to the babies, you had a whole different thing. But we painted the rooms, like typical stuff. We got the crib, we got the baby things. We, did the baby shower, that whole. But in terms of like nuts and bolts kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say nuts and bolts, we didn't know really what was in store for us. I think we'd had a few friends who had kids, but we weren't as involved in their day-to-day. So I would say we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like or be. Also, I was working up until the day that our first was delivered, and it really didn't have any time off, and that was challenging because she had a pretty complicated birth. But I would say, not just getting a crib and painting the room and nursery and those things, but a lot of it had to do with communication between us and coming to an agreement between us of who was doing what did we anticipate things were going to be like, how are we going to prepare as a couple for what we knew was going to be a very big change for us. At that point, we had been married 5 years.
5 years.
We had our first child, and
yes.
That was somewhat intentional for a few reasons. One, we met when I was in medical school. We got married a week after I graduated from medical school, a couple of weeks after you graduated from your master's program, graduate school.
Yep.
Then we literally moved across the country the day after we got married from Virginia to Oregon. And then I started my residency in Oregon
the next day.
So there was just no downtime. And it was very busy, and residencies taxing and all those things. And then I did a fellowship. So another 2 years, a fellowship. So 5 years of training. And it was busy and exhausting as it was. But I think we also just wanted to kind of be married for a while and just enjoy each other and have a little bit of stability. So that was an intentional choice that we made. And then, before her birth, we had a solid relationship, which I think helped us navigate some of the larger decisions we had to make, like what was her last name going to be? There was just like all these decisions that we had to make as a couple. So we would take these early morning walks and kind of try to hash this stuff out together as a couple. And I will never forget, walking around our neighborhood. I was like 8,000 weeks pregnant and walking up this huge hill.
Yes. 8,000 weeks pregnant. Our baby was born as a 12-year-old.
She incubated a lot.
Full head of hair. Full head of teeth.
I felt that way. Anyway, so we would walk up this hugely, huge inclined hill, and I could barely breathe because I was pregnant, and we would be like hashing it out. Specifically, I remember our longest conversation over many, many weeks and many, many walks was what her last name was going to be. And so we called these walks our battle walks.
Yeah, battle walks.
They would start out very amicably. We would just, be talking about, whatever happened that week. And then they would get more heated as we would get more into like really trying to make a decision. And so we would call them our battle walks. And we also had trouble making a decision or remembering that we had made a decision. So we started this sort of like hand signal. So like chopping an axe essentially. So we would have this hand signal and say, okay, this is our decision. And so that we both knew that we had made a decision.
Yeah, that's how we did that. We had to hash it out real hard.
Never forget that.
Yeah, and then she was born, and you're like, what do you want to be her? What do you want for her last name to be? And you could have just been out of your mind, probably. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We talked about this. It's going to be this. We decided. It was like, really? I thought you just wanted to do your last name. Like, we talked about the whole thing. I could have taken advantage of that. It would have been terrible if I did. I would have felt horrible. But like, what did we take that battle walk for? That was like a multi-day. That was many miles. That particular issue was miles of walking over a number of days, for sure.
Not an easy decision.
Well, and we also talked about the reality of like, look, as a physician, your job was a lot different than as a potter. And as a potter, as a physician, the pay is different and the requirements are different. And my ability to be home and to be a little more flexible with time is an important aspect of my role. And it's helped out quite a bit, I think, especially the past 2 years when things have been so hectic and crazy. And I think it took me a while to come to grips with that.
But that wasn't why we made the decision for the last name. But
no, that's a different thing. I'm talking about other things that we had to prepare ourselves for, because that was another conversation we had about roles in the house and who's going to do what. I think as the guy, I definitely felt like I'm not providing enough for my family, but I've made every meal for the past 3 years almost, if it hasn't been ordered out on break nights, and done a fair amount of wood stacking. There's other ways to contribute to the house and to make things, to act, as an anchor. I consider myself the anchor, but that was definitely, trying to work late nights after the kids have gone down is not a thing for me to do. I cannot do that. It's not good for me. It's not good for anybody, really. Again, it goes back to like the resting thing, the sleeping thing, and also expectations. I can do more in 2 hours than I can in 4 at this point, which I think is a good thing to know as well. I know where my boundaries are right now. It'll change over time as the kids get older and I have more time and they are doing their own thing. I'll be able to flex out my days a little bit longer. But it's also like kind of like endurance road racing that I kind of do now too. It's like you don't go out for a 5-hour ride the first time you go. You have to build up to that. So I think as time goes on, I'll be able to build up to having more time in the studio and see what is fruitful and not just me spinning my wheels like I used to do back in the day when I had lots of time, where I had too much time, I think.
But I think what you're talking a little bit about is partnership and how we approach our marriage as a partnership. I see your role and your career as important as mine. And we've always been really worked hard to, in many ways, be different from the norm, right? So the norm, not all families, but some families have, the the husband is the breadwinner, or there's one person who's the quote breadwinner, right? And then there's someone who's at home doing more of the those home responsibilities. Doesn't always have to be a man. It could be the woman in our relationship, or the non-binary person in our relationship. It's me in that role. But I think what's so vitally important is that we've always been working together as a team, as a partnership, to take care of the kids and to understand that there are certain gender roles that we have, but at the same time, we don't have to conform to those gender roles if it doesn't work for our family.
Right.
And I can say openly and honestly that, I appreciate the fact that we have such a partnership, that you're so supportive of me and open to taking on roles that traditionally are generally held more by the quote mother figure or the maternal figure.
Yeah. I'll fold all the underwear. I don't care. And so will our son.
Yes.
He does that too, because it's his job for the day, because the kids have jobs they do to help out around the house. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. It's the only way it could work, I think. And there's not like there's bumps in the road. And sometimes we have to have a reset in terms of like what one of us needs from the other one. We just have a conversation. We try to nip that in the bud. And sometimes it's a longer conversation. Sometimes it's like, can you just not do that, please? And it's like, yeah, I can not do that. Or I can do the thing you need me to do. Sure. Right? Please don't make my smoothie so chunky. I don't like a chunky smoothie. Fine, I can do that. That's not a big deal.
Well, right. But part of it is having a partner who you feel comfortable asking for what you need, like having that conversation, because if you don't have a partnership, or if things are skewed, there's a power differential of some kind, then you may not feel as comfortable saying like, I really need this, or this is something that, this week is going to be really hard for me, whether it's you or me. I really need you to do this thing to help me. And so recognizing that we're having that conversation, we're talking about what each other needs, we're supporting each other, we're trying to make it as equal and supportive and
egalitarian. Yeah.
And love, and in that way, loving towards each other.
That's the bottom line too. And respectful. Did we say respectful? Can we talk about a few indispensable things that we used when the kids were young? Not that we're trying to get people to buy stuff, but there's things that we got our hands on that we found or made ourselves. Like, I'll go first. When we had to travel, we would have the travel bag for the kids. It was always packed. In the travel bag were blackout curtains with clips. There was a sound machine for the white noise. There was a camera with a monitor, and a few other things I think were in there as well. But that was kind of like the shut it down pack.
Right. And it was its own bag. So we didn't have to repack it every time. It's just like, that was their stuff for travel, because I remember, going on trips and not having it, and we'd have to find some big box store and try to find these items. And it was such a hassle. And so we knew we would need it wherever we went. So we just kept it.
We also got a baby Bjorn crib, a travel crib, which is made for like going on flights. It's like really lightweight. It's 3 pieces. It's a bag, a mat, and the frame. It takes a second to, if you've been traveling all day and everyone's exhausted, it's a lot to get the baby down. One thing you don't need to do is, and this sounds like we've been sponsored by Bjorn. We haven't. We've just been through it enough to say like, we were able to also spend a few extra bucks and get this thing. And it made a huge difference.
Yeah, we had it for years.
And
I know they make some newer ones that are even lighter and easier now. So, but investing in something like that, I think is a good idea.
If you're traveling, people haven't been moving around the country very much. Most people, people we know haven't. And people start doing that again. Even if you're in a car, It's just an easy thing to throw into the back of a car too, or in a rocket box on top.
A baby carrier and finding a good one. I mean, they sell all kinds of them now. For us, the Ergo was probably the best one that we tried. We still have it. We borrowed it from a friend. I would also say find a friend who's had a kid and they'll probably give you a bunch of stuff. So hand-me-downs are gold. I just even in the last year, I gave a colleague of mine a ton of stuff for his baby that we had. And, it adds up and it's expensive. And most people, are happy to get rid of it, go to a secondhand store, find this stuff, because every stage of your kid's life, you're going to need different things, and paying, firsthand for this is really not necessary. So go to a secondhand store, get it from a friend, and, ask your friends what they found essential, and don't worry about having the newest and best, because the oldest stuff is really good too.
As long as it's safe, it's fine.
Yeah. Baby monitors, I think those you usually have to buy, because I think we've bought 4 or 5 of them in our lifetime. Unfortunately, they don't last that long. I know there's some newer kinds now, but those you kind of have to buy new, I think.
We swaddled our babies. The one thing that I found really helpful was a thing called the miracle blanket, where it has interior flaps. You kind of use the baby's arms to hold itself down and you wrap it up again. It's like a double wrap burrito kind of a situation. And our kids are pretty strong, and they were strong as babies, and they would just get out of those wraps because our kids liked being swaddled quite a bit. And even if I did a really good job wrapping, sometimes with our second especially, he would pull out of that thing in a second, and because he has these really strong, broad shoulders. But the miracle blanket I think we got a couple of them, and they were the best because the kids stayed sleeping safely tucked in all night, or for the amount of length the kid was going to sleep, if not all night.
And the one book that I recommend for all my friends is Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Baby. We really utilize that book by Wise Bluth. We utilize that book, and I've borrowed it to countless friends to really help kind of be a good guide for getting your kids on a good sleep track.
I mean, it all takes work. I mean, that book also, it's hard to read a book when you're overextended, working too long, and also extremely tired and have a baby. But it doesn't make sense to read the book beforehand because you don't know what's going to happen. So there's it's kind of like an oxymoron. You have to read this book, but you're going to be in the worst shape of your life mentally, physically, and exhausted wise. You're going to be right on top of that, your top level exhaustion. Here, read a book because now it's going to make sense.
But it was almost like one of the best self-help books, I guess. I was, when our kids were little and not sleeping well, I just remember trying to find anything that would help. And so reading it was in some ways very cathartic, because I was like, okay, this is something. It's telling me exactly what I should do. And I think that's where it's hard as a new parent you're just what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It's just, you just need some tools, and every kid's going to be different. Every kid's going to need something different. Only you are really going to know what's best for your kid. And so this worked for our kids. It doesn't mean it's going to work for your kids, but for me, it was really helpful because I knew that sleep was vital for my health and well-being. So that manual in particular was really helpful to have just additional tools. And I always remember thinking as a new parent, why has someone not written an actual manual on having a kid? Everybody has kids, and yet no one can tell me exactly what to do for my kid in this situation.
That's what I was going to bring up next. We looked at each other one time. Remember this very specific memory. I have this very specific memory of us looking at each other and be like, we've been having people as a species, people have been having other people for thousands and thousands a year. No one has any idea what to do. Not a one. So you could feel really lonely at that point. Or you could say, you know what? No one has any idea. I also don't have any idea. I'm in with the people who have no idea what to do. I'll just use my whatever common sense I have in my head and see what works. And then sometimes it's trial and error, as long as no one's getting hurt, I don't know. You just kind of figure it out.
You inherently know when things aren't working well.
Yeah. You learn to trust your gut a bit differently.
And you should reach out for obviously professional help at that point. I think, having friends who've had kids is always really helpful to bounce things off of them. Like, what worked for you? What should I do in this situation? I definitely did that a lot. But I think the thing people don't tell you is how hard certain things will be. For instance, like breastfeeding is actually incredibly hard, particularly at first. And so normalizing that and helping you recognize that if you don't have a good enough, or, if your milk supply is not sufficient for your baby, that's okay. You shouldn't feel bad about that. There are ways around it. I remember just feeling this incredible guilt and shame because I was not producing enough milk for my kids. And the whole anti-formula contingent is not helpful. And I don't know. So I guess I would say that every kid's going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. You just got to give yourself some grace and just recognize you cannot do it all. You're not going to be super mom or super dad. And we've all been through it, and just talk to your friends, and it's okay to say it's hard because there will be days where it's really hard.
Or it's impossible.
Yeah. But most days are worth it.
I have a couple more questions to wrap up with. And I think I know where this is going to go, but when we anticipate a transition in life or work, how do we prepare, would you say? I was going to say, usually talk about it. I mean, transitions and kids can be tricky. You are better at kind of seeing the lay of the land than I am, and are a bit more flexible, especially when the kids are inflexible. You'll be more flexible, and I tend to be more rigid. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Or how do we navigate a transition?
What type of transition?
I don't know. There's so many different degrees. If we know we have to shut the TV off, it's 5:00 and we have to have dinner and there's no more TV that night, what would you do? These are for school. This is for school age kids.
I mean, I think some of the same principles apply to the extent that you can give your kids warnings, you can provide structure so they know what to anticipate. You can talk to them about it beforehand so they know they have, 20 minutes to watch TV or 30 minutes to watch TV or whatever. So make that very, very clear from the beginning. Give them warnings, put on a timer. I mean, we used to have to put on timers and have alarms going off and things like that.
We still put on timers. I still put on timer.
Yeah. Our kids have gotten a little bit better about that. But I mean, even with ample warning and things like that, it can still be challenging. That being said, I think if you set a boundary or you set a specific time for a transition, it's important to follow it.
Stick to it, yeah.
And to be on the same page. I think we've had some challenges as parents sometimes where I won't know that you set a specific boundary with the kids because maybe I was in a meeting or who knows, and I come home and the kids say, "Hey mom, can I have dessert?" Me not knowing that you already told them absolutely under no circumstances can you have dessert. But they know that I don't know that because I literally just walked in the door.
Yeah.
And so I'll say, and of course I'm like bleary eyed and can barely keep my head up and haven't eaten in 12 hours. And I'm like, I don't know. And they take that as a mom said I could have dessert, so
Mom said I could have the most dessert I want. Yes.
Right. So we started, I know you started like texting me when I'm on my way home. You'll say, I told our child she cannot have dessert.
Don't believe anything they say. Essentially, don't believe anything they say. Yeah.
So again, talks about that communication, you've got to be a unified front. And we've definitely had our ups and downs with that, where I might feel less less of a need to be like super rigid about something. And so then we talk about it, we might come to a compromise. But again, it's all about communication. Like we have to be communicating. We have to be on the same page. If we are not, the kids know, and they will run wild with that. So this parenting business, I tell you.
I'm going to add one thing too. In terms of what's been indispensable for me in my role has been, I try to do a good job of owning up to when I make a mistake, especially when the kids are involved. So I will, not routinely, but when I need to, I will apologize. Like I'll own up to stuff I didn't do the way I should have done it. I could have done it better. I'm sorry, guys. And I think that goes a long way in terms of showing them respect as people. Not just, sometimes kids just don't get the respect they deserve. We try to do that. I try to do that. Look, I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better. Or, I think I just haven't eaten, or I'm cranky today, or this went wrong and it's not about you. It's just came out the wrong way and I'm sorry. I try to set that standard for them to see, to be accountable, because they have their days. We all do. And I feel like if they see me doing that, it's easier for them to do it. And it's more, I don't know. There's no pride involved. I'm not going to apologize for that. It's like, no, I'm definitely going to touch base because I could have done that better. And not the end of the world. I should have done that better. Sorry, can we move on? And sometimes I get, okay, Dad, I forgive you. And sometimes I get, Dad, I do not forgive you. And I feel terrible. But then I get a little look and I'm like, I forgive you now.
I think it also helps them understand that we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. It's important that you learn from your mistakes. It's important that we're all growing, that we're all leading with kindness and love. And we're definitely not perfect parents, and we don't pretend to be. And I think the fact that we can show our kids that respect is vitally important.
I think that's a great place to end.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. I'll see you in 3 seconds. We have to get the kids out of the house because they have to get up and go talk about transitions. Okay. Well, folks, thank you for listening. This has been Brian Jones and Dr. Melissa Weimer. If you want to reach out to me, my Instagram is at Brian R. Jones. And make sure you listen to past and future episodes of the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler. Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities whose lands we reside on in the United States, and recognize that we are uninvited guests on the occupied, unceded, and ancestral lands of over 500 nations indigenous to North America. By acknowledging and reflecting upon the contemporary lived experiences and histories of the Indigenous peoples here and globally, we may begin to take essential steps towards creating a more equitable world. Learn more through the hashtag Honor Native Land initiative of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, and consider contributing to Indigenous-led organizations doing important work to further health and wellness, sovereignty, and self-determination of the first people of the lands you reside. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
That was good.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Nice to see you.
Okay, you guys got like 5 minutes, okay?